going to be talking about interview skills, which is very, very important. And as I always say in resume workshops, the resume gets you the interview and the interview gets you the job. So if you have a very catching resume, a very selling resume to send out to employers, and you are getting callbacks for interviews, and you're not getting a job after the interviews, all the interviews that you attend, we always say then there's a problem that we need to what? Identify, which is what are you saying to employers in interviews? Are you selling yourself enough? Are you doing something? Are you saying certain things that are preventing employers from hiring you? So if that is the case, then we need to what? Look at what we can address, what we can equip ourselves with in terms of interviews so that when we get in, we will be able to. So this workshop is geared towards us what? Building our knowledge, gaining some more knowledge, sharing ideas here, and then taking it from there. And if you have a job interview, you can reach out to us, and then we will do interview prepping. We will do mock interview to practice with you before you then go in for the job interview. And I always encourage people, if you have a job interview, please, if you are reaching out and you have the job posting, that will be very helpful. And then the resume that you sent out, or the CV or the cover letter, are very helpful, so that we'll look at that. And then based on that, we will do the prepping or the mock interviews, which is a practice. So how many of us have been to a job interview and can maybe share what questions were asked, and then which ones would you say were the hardest questions for you to answer, and then the easiest one for you to answer? Anybody can share. If you've ever been to a job interview, fine. What would you say were the hardest questions asked, and then what were the easiest? You can either just raise up your hand and then share, or you can type it in the chat button as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem.
I've attended an interview before,
Mhm.
and the interview that I attended was not. It wasn't too planned because I was just calling impromptu.
Mhm.
So when I went, I think one of the hardest questions was tell us about yourself. And that's one of the basic and first questions that is mostly asked. And I consider it hard because I didn't really know where to start from. I
Mhm.
didn't know
Yeah.
whether they were talking about my personal life, my professional
Mhm.
life.
Oh.
So I was really just mixing them together.
Okay. Thank you. I think
Yeah.
somebody asked a question, that question in the comments, about
Okay.
what did they want to ask. There's one question. I think we have two questions in the messages. You know, now what we've done is to always include a section in the registration, just so that people can ask questions related to the topic that the workshop is going to center on. So there are two questions, which one is the tell me about yourself, and the other one is how to prepare yourself for an interview. So I'm hoping by the end of this workshop, this question will be answered. And then also the question about how to prepare yourself for an interview is all going to be covered in this discussion. So Richard, thank you for that point, but we will come back to that. I'm sure by the end of this, you'll be able to answer that question. You'll see how easy that is to answer.
Okay.
Maybe. Okay, Mbrodiba's hand was up.
Yes, yes. I think I share the same experience as Richard. Richard said.
Okay.
Yes. So I even asked a question in the comment section. I asked a question about
Okay.
how to
Okay.
about the question of
So
tell us who you are.
we
Yeah,
will.
yeah, yeah. I had
Okay.
similar experience.
Okay.
I was asked tell us about yourself, and I didn't know how to start, where to start. I was just messing up. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. By the end of this workshop, I'm sure you are going to be an expert in answering that question. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'll
No
be
problem.
glad.
Okay. Combat. Fatah has a question, or his hand is up, and then the next person will be Fuseni Adam. Yeah. Fatah, go ahead.
Thank you, madam.
No problem.
The most difficult question I've ever faced is Why are you leaving your current job?
Okay, why are you leaving your current job? Okay,
Thank you.
no problem. Okay, and then
Yes, thank you so much.
no
Thank
problem.
you so much for this opportunity.
No
It's
problem.
been a great to have on the rejoin this workshop. The question that I actually had difficulties when I with one of my interview I attended was uh, meeting a target, your target, as in when you are approaching your deadline
Mm-hmm,
and not meeting your target. What do you do
mm-hmm.
when you are not
Yeah,
meeting your target?
no, what?
When you are actually meeting up your deadline? So with this
Uh,
particular question, I was actually confused as in how to start and
mm,
end it.
I'm sure by the end, people are going to know how to answer this. So we have some good questions. So I'm going to let us go fast just so that we can finish. And then what we do is based on the question, a few questions that we'll talk about how the workshop will go, then we'll come back and see if we can answer, we can brainstorm on answering some of these questions. So now let's talk. We all know interviews is what? It's always a conversation between you, the job seeker, and what? The representative of the company or the employer. And the essence of them doing that is what? For them to see how you fit into the position that you applied for. And we always tell people that the resume gets you an interview and the interview gets you the job. And always remember when an employer calls you for an interview, they've reviewed your resume. No employer will call you for an interview without reviewing your resume. So if they call you, it means there's something they've seen and they are calling you. And when you go in and you don't get the job, then it means it's two things. Either you don't, what they saw on the resume or the CV is not what they are hearing from you. So that is why it's always good to also practice your questions and then also review the job posting and review your resume so that when you go in and you're talking in an interview, you are matching your skill set, your experience with what the employer is looking for. We always think, oh yeah, this I sent my CV. Yeah, they call me for an interview. Oh, it's just a conversation. No, you have to still back this CV up again because what they are looking at is they want to see some consistency in what you say to them verbally versus what you have on your CV. And with CVs, people can work on CVs for you. But when it gets to an interview, you will have to speak for yourself. So that is why they always call you for an interview. And then also, the job interviews are one of the what? The most popularly used strategies for employee selection. Even placement agencies, we talked about that last week in job search strategies, they still interview you. They interview you to pick the best for the employer. So in any job that you go to, you go through an interview, and sometimes you might just walk in and somebody's talking to you and you think it's just a conversation, and in a way it's an interview. The person is indirectly interviewing you. And that is why last week in the job search strategies workshop, I was talking about when you go in for to drop off your resume, you go in to do what? Reaching out to employers to tap into unsolicited job opportunities. Make sure you dress appropriate because you don't know who you are going to meet. And then you don't know when you go in whether you are going to be asked questions. And I think I gave an example of an individual that went to drop off their resume, their CV at an employer that requested for that, only for the person to go get there, and then the employer started asking questions, which it took the person by surprise because she thought she was just dropping off her CV, only to be asked interview questions. So now we talk about interviews. We all know we have different what types of interviews. So informational interviews are usually very good for people who are making career switch, and also it's also good for new graduates who are looking for, maybe you are targeting certain companies that you want to work for. So you've decided to conduct informational interviews with maybe the managers or the hiring manager, or maybe the program coordinator or the program manager. For example, if you want to get into program work, field work, and then you are a new graduate and you want to gather more information to see if you can build some network, informational interviews are very, very important. because you're asking them questions about the field, how they started, where they are, and then what suggestions they can give you as a new graduate to help you break through. So if I'm talking and you have a question, please just raise your hand or type it in the chat bottom. I don't want people to think when I'm speaking they can ask questions, because the essence of this is for us to all learn, and then it should be participatory. So if you have a question, raise up your hand or type it in the chat. Yeah. So informational interviews are very good for new graduates, people making career switch as well. You use that to gather information. And now on Google, you go in and type questions. Informational interview questions is going to give you a bunch of questions to select from. And I think in the handouts, Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we have some samples. I'm not sure if I added some of that, but you will be getting a handout that gives you information. It provides you with information on all what I'm talking about, so that at least, and then there are some questions and answers that you can tap into, and then also just make it your own and use it in interviews. So also we have telephone and screening interviews. Sometimes an employer might call you just to ask you one or two questions and then tell you, oh, we'll call you back later for an interview. Or sometimes they will just speak to you, and then by the end of it, they will then book you. Some will tell you they are calling you to screen. Some will not tell you. And most of the time, call center jobs, customer service representative job. If you have to do a job that requires you being on the phone, most of the time, some employers will call you just to see how you sound on the phone as well. So if you are looking for work jobs that requires you to be on the phone, which is customer service related, sometimes they call you and they start to talk to you on the phone. It's part of the screening. They might not tell you they are screening you, but they are screening you on the phone. So just be mindful of that. So I always tell people, if you get a phone call and the person starts, hello, my name is Anda, I'm calling from African Canadian Center, and it's in regards to the CV that you forwarded for a position. If you are at a noisy place, just tell Anda, thank you so much for calling me, reaching out to me, but I'm at the moment somewhere that is too noisy. So are you okay if I call you back in 2 minutes or in 5 minutes, just so that I can find somewhere to stand? It's better than you talking in the noisy place. So you can do that. Or sometimes you don't answer the call and then later you call. But I know in Ghana, we don't have answering machines whereby you can say the person can leave a message. But if you can't keep track of that and call, fine. But I always encourage people, if it's a noisy place, just tell the person to give you a few minutes to find somewhere. But if you're looking for jobs that requires you to be speaking on the phone, most of the time they will screen. And big companies also do that. Mostly the screening you get it will be from placement agencies too. And some organizations also do that, especially if they have too many resumes, CVs, and they want to narrow it down, then they call to do phone screening before they eventually call you in, they eventually book you for an interview. And then now we know what we have all the time. It's all about virtual interviews, and we're just doing virtual workshops now, because COVID has come to teach employers to now be using virtual interviews instead of face-to-face. I tell people at work, I'm sitting in my office, my director is beside me, but guess what we're doing? We're on Teams video calling and talking, instead of one of us just getting up to walk to the other person, because if I'm speaking in my office, she can hear me. But that is what COVID has come to teach us, and its employers are saying it's now very convenient for them and it's cost effective for them as well. And I think on the aspect of job seekers too, we think it's cost effective for us, because if I have an interview in Accra, I want to relocate to a job in Accra, and an employer can conduct a virtual interview with me, then it saves me time. And now even we do job fairs using via virtual virtually instead of face-to-face. So we will go more into what you need to be aware of when you are going to be getting interviews, or if you're going to be conducting interviews virtually with employers. And then we also have group interviews that sometimes employers will do. I don't know if anybody has experienced that before, where maybe we applied for field worker position, and then they put all of us in one room, and then they ask all of us the same question. So Richard will go first and tell me about yourself. They will ask Richard, and then Richard will answer. They will go to Mbrodiba. Mbrodiba, tell me about yourself. And then they will go to Fatal, tell me about yourself. They will go to Adam, tell me about yourself. I know I've been in an interview like that once, but it's not fun because the last person gets the advantage. And the first person, you don't know whether what you are saying is true. And then the others, you feel they will tap into what you said and then kind of polish their answers. But they do that. Some companies do it, especially if they are doing mass hiring. They mostly tend to do that, where they will do group interviews, and the questions will always be the same, that you ask the whole room, they will ask round. And then in person, formal and informal interviews. So it could be that you're doing single interview, just one person interviewing you, and then sometimes it could be one or two or three people interviewing you. So the informal one is you just walking in to see if they are hiring, and then before you realize they are interviewing you there, the person is asking you questions. Okay, so tell me about it. So why do you want to work with us? You came to drop off your CV. Why do you want to work with us? That's an informal interview that somebody's asking, interviewing you. Or you go and say, oh, you know what, I'm coming to see if you are currently hiring. Or, oh, you call and the person is talking to you. And this informal interview could even be over the phone if you are cold calling employers. So it's not just when you are in person that it will be that you are you are getting this informal interview. So we just have to be prepared. And then we have single interviewer, which is one person just interviewing you, and we have multiple and panel interviewers too. So we always encourage that if you have more than 2 or 3 people interviewing you, showing eye contact to all the 3 interviewing you is very important. And for me, the technique I use is whoever is asking me a question, I give direct eye contact to the person, and then when I receive the question and I'm going to answer, then that's when I give eye contact to the other 2 or 3 that are in the panel. So that is the trick I use, because when I show eye contact to whoever is asking me the question, I'm telling the person that, you know what, I'm listening to what you are telling me. And then when I start to answer the question and I'm looking at everybody and speaking, I'm telling them now I'm responding to all of you, not just the one person that asked me the question. And usually in interviews, they split the questions where one will be writing, where they will all have questions that they will ask you. And I always tell people that the trick in an interview is, if you go to an interview and you are talking, and maybe you have 3 people interviewing you, and at least 2 or 1 is not busy writing, then you should ask yourself if you are answering the questions right, because nobody will want to write anything that doesn't make sense to them. And if they are interviewing you, always remember they have your CV and they have the job posting, and the questions they ask, they want to see how what you have on your CV matches with what you are saying and comes to justify that you are the right person for that position. With video interviews, I think virtual interviews, I did mention to you that most employers are now using it, and it is said that about 60% of employers are now using virtual interviews because they think it's very helpful and cost effective. And then also I did mention that COVID has come to teach us how to use this, and that is why now we are all using Zoom, and they see to be time effective. Because I'll just give you an example. Last week I had mock interviews with an employer for a group that I'm training, and then the employer was supposed to come to us for the mock interview. So she was supposed to spend the whole day with us, and then she did send me a message saying, you know what, I have a program that I need to run, but I have to be in the office so that I can be there to see what they are doing, because the travel time to our place, she can use it to do something before the time that we were supposed to start. So what I did was just to create a Teams invite for the whole morning. So we did the morning and afternoon, and then I tell you, she told me it helped her so much because she was able to then the break time to use it to do something. And then the 1 hour that she was supposed to drive to come to my location, she was able to use it to catch up some work, delegate some tasks to her staff before starting the mock interviews with my group at 10 o'clock. So you see how cost effective it is and time effective that can be for people. So that is why most employers use it. Now we see people, you even in Tamale, and they are interviewing you on Zoom. And then we see the beauty of it now is also that at least if you are in Tamale and you're looking for a job in Accra, because you've made up your mind you relocate to Accra, an employer will not want you to spend money taking transportation to come when they are not sure if they are going to hire you, and they know at least there's an option of what them being able to do it virtually with you, so they go by that, which is the beauty of what COVID has brought, except the deaths that many lives that COVID made us lose. But so on technology, we all know that when we talk about interviews and COVID, it's always about what we need to always make sure when we are going to, just because employers are using virtual interviews now, we need to also be mindful of that and prepare ourselves. Because with this post-COVID, this thing is still going to happen. Employers are still going to be interviewing people via Zoom, Google Meet, or Teams. And I think this week I had 2 individuals that had their interviews, and their interviews were all going to be via Zoom. So it means that is the order of the day now. So we just have to prepare ourselves for that. And if we equip ourselves and become aware of how to prepare ourselves, then it makes life easy for us. And we will even love that more than going in person. So for you to be successful in a virtual interview without any inconveniences, we always encourage people to use a laptop or a computer with camera and microphone. So for those who are in Tamale, we open Monday to Friday. So if you have an interview virtually and you don't have access to a laptop or a computer, and you want to come to our space and sit there and conduct your interview, that is fine. We have webcams on our computers. We have headsets that you can use, and then we'll find you a quiet place to sit in and do the interview without any distraction, if that will be helpful to you. But that is just for the only those in Tamale, unfortunately. And then also try and avoid using your phone or iPad just for picture stability. But sometimes if we don't have any option, then what do we do? That's what we will do. We will use. And then you need to have high-speed internet. So I always tell people, if you're using your phone, then make sure you have bundled just so that your phone doesn't, your interview doesn't cut in the middle of it just because of lack of credit. And then also because it's part of the preparation. So if it happens that happens to you, and you tell an employer that, oh, you ran out of credit, then the employer is going to say you lack planning skills, because that should be part of your plan and your preparation for the interview. And then you also have to be familiar with using Zoom, Skype. Most employees don't use Skype now. Skype is now the order of the day, or Viber. But most employers are now using Zoom and then Teams. So if you are familiar with all these things, fine. I think we posted on our Facebook page and on WhatsApp on how to use Google Meet, because most employees are also using that. So, and that is what we use for our workshops. So downloading that on your phone is easy. And sometimes if an employer is going to use Teams, they will send you a link and tell you and ask you to download Teams. And then also will ask you to download Zoom. But with Zoom, I believe if you click on the link, it should take you to open to join the workshop. And then with Google, the beauty is that most of us we use our Google email accounts to set up our phones, so we don't need to download anything. I think you just need to enter certain informations, and the instructions are straightforward on the video Frank posted on our social media platforms, just so that those who don't know how to use that can then follow that tutorial which will be very helpful. And so try and install the software. So some employers will tell you the softwares they want you to install. If they are inviting you for an interview and they don't use any of the common softwares, they will send you the link of the software that they use and then tell you to download it. And if you are using your phone, you will still be able to download it on your phone. So now let's go to how to prepare for a virtual interview. Have reliable equipment and check it before the time. So I saw some of us joined few minutes early before 1:30 just because we know it's about technology and we need to be sure that at least we are able to join in. So I always tell people, even if you are going in for a virtual interview, I always suggest that you join at least 10, 15 minutes before the time. You can join 15 minutes, see how it goes. And then if you want to log out and log back in quickly, maybe 10 minutes before, then fine. And even if they don't accept you in, they will see you. They will be able to see that you have come and you are in the queue. And that way you are demonstrating what? Good planning skills and good time management skills. If you write on your CV that you have strong time management skills and you come to a job interview, be it in person or virtual, and then we said the interview is at 11, and right at 11 is when you are joining, you are telling me you don't have good time management skills, because the individuals that are joining the panel could be on earlier than you. So if you don't want a panel to join before you join, if you stay in the queue, then you are demonstrating time management to them. And I always do. I will always do that. I always join at least 10 minutes before the time, so that when they come, they will see me in the queue, or they will say hi to me and tell me, okay, I will be with you shortly. And then I'll say, oh yeah, that's okay. I'll just mute myself. I just didn't want to be late, because we're dealing with technology. So you're telling them, you know what, you plan yourself. You are a very organized person. So set up Zoom or Viber on your phone based on what the employer will tell you they need you to download. And now we go to all the apps, all the phones that we use now have those things, so we can easily do that. And then test your equipment for no surprises. I always do that. I come in, I start this workshop at 9. We do it at 9:30 at my place, and then 1:30 in Ghana. But myself and Frank, we always make sure we join at least 20 minutes or 15 minutes before time, just so that we can troubleshoot any issue before you all join. So that is how we do it, just so that we're sure everything is okay for you join the group. And use power cables. If you are using a laptop, try and use power cables. Now that I'm talking to you, my power cable is connected, because if the battery dies off and I'm in the middle of a conversation, before I realize what is going to happen, the computer is going to go off. So if it's your phone, it's going to be the same thing. So you have to, if your phone charges and then you can use it for an hour, then fine, charge it 100% before you start. But if you're using a laptop that is halfway through, then you need to plug in the battery. Or if you fully charge the laptop, then you are fine. Usually computers are automatically plugged in, but laptops we can unplug. So just be mindful of that when you are preparing for a virtual interview. And turn off your phone or put it on silent, because you have a phone on you in an interview, and then you never know who is going to call you, and then the phone will ring. Remember, if they are interviewing you, if it's a panel interview, or you are the person, they won't mute themselves. They usually don't mute themselves, and you are not muted too. So if your phone rings, if you're on a laptop for your interview and your phone rings, people can easily just hear that. People can easily just hear that in the background, which you don't want to create that impression, because that will not speak well of you. You're not creating a good impression. It's part of creating a good impression. And then so what I usually do is I'll turn off my phone. Now that I'm in this workshop with you, my phone is on silent. So even if somebody is calling, it's not going to ring unless I have time to look at it to see who is calling, but it won't ring. And I always give an example of a time when I went to a job interview and I had my phone on it was face-to-face interview. So I had my phone on a vibration and it was in my purse. And the unfortunate thing that happened to me was that when I went into the interview, they asked me to put my purse on the floor, which was a carpet floor. So I put the phone, my purse in the phone, and I started the interview. And then before I realized, the phone was ringing. So it was shaking in the purse. And just imagine how one can concentrate when it's like that, because the room was quiet. So everybody, the panel could hear the bag, some kind of sound, unusual sound in the bag, my purse. And I tell you, it distracted me and I felt so embarrassed. And since then, I started to put my phone on silent anytime I am going into an interview. And I always share that with my clients to tell them, I thought, oh, vibration is in my purse, so it won't sound. But I forgot that the room was quiet and that could let them hear an unusual sound. So just thought I'll share this with you so that we'll be mindful. So even when you are going in, this is not just for virtual, when you're going in for in person, you have to do that. And my experience had to do with going in person. So even virtually, I don't do it. And I just said to you that my phone is off, is on silent right now. Try and use a quiet place. If you are doing the interview at home, use a quiet place, no background noise. TV is off. My TV is on silent. Sometimes I turn it off when I have workshops. And then use a plain wall with an appealing background. You see where I'm sitting in my house. I sit at somewhere that at least is a little plain. I make space in my house where I should sit and do and conduct my workshops, because I can show my whole living room or my whole house. It's unprofessional. So at least I try to find a place where this is plain. And I'm sure you see the background where you see plain, a few, maybe one or two distance pictures that you see, which are not pictures of myself. So try and then get a background that is clean. If you're using your room, you can just make room for get a chair and sit at a quiet place and then have the interview, because that you are also showing the employer your planning skills and then showing how organized you are too, and it's creating a good impression to show that you know the difference between just sitting on your bed for an interview, or when we were in school, you could just sit on your bed. If it's virtual class, you sit on your bed whilst you're talking to the professor, but that is your professor. But in an interview, you want to create a good first impression, so you stay out of that. If you don't have space and you can go to somebody's office and sit and do it, fine. If you can go get a family member's space and do it, go ahead and do that, because that will be very helpful. If not, that might cost you as well. And we've talked about getting a quiet room, and then try and let the kids stay out. Some of us with parents who are parents, we should do that. We should try and always alert our children. My son knows I have interviews a workshop this morning, so whenever I have workshops, he stays in his room. He won't even come out to distract me. If not, you see him walking past me, which is not good. So that's what I do. I share with him if I have a workshop, just so that he doesn't come. He knows the time, and when I'm done, he can tell that I'm done before he comes in. So that's what I do. That's how I operate when I have virtual interviews, or if I have virtual workshops. And then get a clean and neat place. A place where there's no distraction. And try and also make sure you have a pen, a copy of your CV, and then your questions to ask the employer. We always hear people say, oh yeah, do I have to ask an employer question? Yes, you have to ask, to show how interested you are, to show how eager you want to join the company, and when you would hear back from them. And there are certain questions that you could also ask in an interview. And some of the questions are in the handouts that you'll be getting. And I always tell people, don't ask questions about pay unless the employer brings it up. What you should be asking is showing the employer that you are interested in the company, which is maybe finding out more about What do they expect from somebody in this role? Can they describe a typical day for somebody in this role? What are the benchmarks for somebody in this role? What would they say are the challenges for this position based on their experience? So these questions you're asking an employer to show your interest, and not questions about, oh, do you provide benefits to your employees? How much are you paying for this position? Oh, would I get promoted to a higher position when I join your organization? You don't want to be asking those questions. Remember, you want to show how useful you'll be to the employer. And we all know that if I go to a company and I work hard, I'll eventually what? Grow. I will eventually get what? Promoted. But you don't want to say it in an interview where maybe the company, they don't promote people. So maybe they will think that if you come in and you're not getting promotion, you might leave. And that is not what you want. You might be able to what? Gain that experience and then use it to get a better job somewhere else. And which is what we should always be looking at. Company A might not give me promotion, but my experience in company A would eventually lead me to a higher position in company B. Because the more skills and experience I have, the more opportunities come my way. So always remember to have your CV, a copy of your CV, even if it's you had a cover letter, have a copy of it on you, notes, your pen, a notebook, and then some questions to ask the employer. One time I referred somebody to an interview, and then the person went for the interview, and unfortunately the person was supposed to fill out a registration form, which the employer didn't tell us about. And then this person went in and asked the employer if the employer had a pen for her. And then the employer was very disappointed. And I did tell the individual, make sure you have a pen and paper on you. And then she goes to the interview, they finish, and then the employer said to fill out a registration form, which is part of their process. And then she asked for a pen. So the employer gave her the pen and then called me and said, I can't believe your individual came in without a pen. How can you go to work without a pen? What if she came in and I was going to give her a test to write? Because I don't have to tell you I'm going to give her a test to write. I just need to confirm to you that I'm going to interview her. So that was a learning experience for that individual. So always make sure you have a copy of your what? CV, especially if for that position that you're being interviewed for. And then what? Your reference list. I know in Ghana, we always include our reference list in when we're sending out our CVs. But a few people CVs that I've done, I've tried to always put it as a separate sheet, just because when I used to, I don't know when that changed, but when I used to work in Ghana and I used to apply for jobs, I used not to attach my reference list unless they ask for the reference list. So people can start to do that, put it on a separate sheet, because I always think I don't like sending that reference list when they don't ask for. What if maybe I know Richard, and then I worked with Richard before, and maybe we didn't, something happened and then things didn't go well, and then I see Richard's resume, CV, and then he gives me a reference list, and I see Mbrodiba's name as his supervisor, who I ever worked with, who is my friend. Am I called to tell Mbrodiba, oh, that guy you're going to interview? Oh, how do you know? Well, can you tell me something about Richard? And Mbrodiba said, oh, yeah, I worked with him, but yeah, okay, you know what? I don't know, but if you want to hire him, fine, but he's another piece of work. Then that chance is ruined there. So you can, if you send your resume, your CV to an employer with a reference, without a reference list, the employer will not let that stop them from calling you for an interview. Because if they don't call you for an interview, where does that reference list go to? That's another question. So we always encourage people, even if you attach it, then fine, still have a copy on you if you're going into face-to-face interview, just so that if they ask you for your reference list, you give it right there. You give it to them. And then also make a list of questions to ask the employer. And I did just give a few examples of questions that you can ask. And I think in the handout, we have that as well. But also you can always just Google that, what good questions to ask an employer in an interview. Because employers will say, why would you come to an interview and then I finish and ask you, do you have any questions for me? And you say no, then it means you're not interested in the job. So there's nothing that you want to learn more about. Because sometimes some employers will give you an introduction. They'll give you an introduction. Some don't give you an introduction. So if they don't give you an introduction based on your research that you did about them, you could have some questions to ask, but not pay related, unless they bring the salary part out, where they ask you, how much do you want us to pay you? You throw the question back to them. If you know how much they pay, you say, based on your research, a position like this pays ranging from this to that. Or based on your experience or your research, program officers within nonprofit start pay from this range. And then you throw the question back to them and ask them, so how much are you offering for this position? Because you don't want to say too much or too little, which might go against you. So salary questions, benefits questions is something that you should stay out of it, especially if we don't have much experience. Try and always encourage them that you want to utilize your skill set. You want to utilize the background that you have, the studies that you've studied, the topics, all the knowledge that you've gained in school. You want to bring it to an employer, and they have their salary scale. And the best answer I always give, if they ask me how much do you want us to pay you, I throw it back to them and I ask them, how much are you offering for this position? Since you are the employer and you have your budget for a position like this, I am open to a negotiation. So you tell me how much you're going to be paying for this. And that way, what happens? You throw in the question back to the employer. So you escape from the aspect of maybe you said too much or you said too little, and leave it to them to decide. And so I'm sure some of us would have seen on job postings where they will write that as pay depends on experience. So when they have something like that, you tell them, you know what, on the job posting it said pay, yeah, the salary depends on what experience. So you are interviewing me now, and I'm sure based on how the interview goes, you will be able to determine where I fit in terms of the salary scale, and then we can talk about it. But I want to assure you that I really want to be in an organization like this where I see myself utilizing my skills and that to contribute to what you are doing. And then also we tell jobs seekers going in for job interviews to have a portfolio if it's relevant. If you are going in for positions that where you need to show samples of your work, then it's very, very important. If you're an artist, if you're a graphic design, if you're a website developer, if you are a pastry chef, if you are a chef where you cook food and what, you need to show samples of your work. If you are a dressmaker, you need samples of your work to show. If you are working in my field as a career professional and you're going in for a job position as a counselor or employment specialist or employment advisor, then you need to have what? Samples of CVs that you've helped customers, your clients develop, samples of what? Workshops that you've developed yourself, samples of cover letters that you've helped clients to write to send out to employers, because you showing that evidence predicts how you will help what? Job seekers within the company that you are being interviewed for to work with. And then always remember to have a pen and paper. Even if it's virtually, have pen and paper so that you can write certain things that the employer tells you, because that is what shows that you are prepared. So we've talked about what to bring, what the interview, how to prepare yourself. Now let's look at how do we make good impression. I talked about making a good impression. How do we make the first good impression? Because the good impression opens you up to kind of a dialogue with the employer, or it just makes the employer click with you. Dress appropriate. If you come to me for an interview and you walk in and I think you're just going to the club, you think I'm going to be impressed, that might make me shorten my interview questions with you. I might just ask you 1 or 2 questions and let you go. Or sometimes the employer just look at you and you're like, okay. And then this dressing appropriate also shows the employer whether you know the difference between formal and informal interview or not. So, and I tell people, you don't have to necessarily wear a suit and tie, depending on where you're going for the interview. If you are going for a job interview and it's in the bank, then maybe you want to wear a tie. On if you don't have a blazer to put on, just wear your dress shirt, tuck in properly, have your belt on, and then you can have a small tie, or you don't. If you don't have a tie, no, you don't have to go spend money on that. But we always tell people to try and dress to blend in with the organization that they are going to be working for, or they want to work for, and as a result of that, going for an interview. Because if you are going to the bank for an interview and you walk in with a jeans, the manager is going to look at you and scratch his or her head, because you walk into the bank, you see how they dress. So you just automatically see that you don't fit in, which is creating a bad impression for the employer to think you don't fit in, because you couldn't even do your homework to prepare and know that, you know what, I should dress appropriate. I shouldn't wear jeans to that interview, since I know the bank workers don't wear jeans. Arrive about 15 minutes early. Remember, we talked about this. So if you write on your CV that you are very organized, you have strong time management skills, strong organizational skills, strong planning skills, and you have an interview at 1:30, and 1:30 is when you are trying to log in, then you are telling me that you don't have that skill. You just put it there, but you don't walk the talk. Walk in with confidence if it's an in-person interview. Hello, my name is Anda Salifu. I'm here to see Frank for an interview. Okay, Anda, have a seat. Frank will be with you shortly. Thank you. Because the interview also starts from the receptionist. The receptionist also has some points to make. I remember my second job. When I came in, I greeted the receptionist, introduced myself, and then she said, okay, have a seat. And I said, thank you. And I said, I didn't know there was a checklist for her to see how I presented myself. Did I say hi? Did I introduce myself before going to sit? Before she telling me to sit and all those things. Until later when I started to work, and then she then told me, and I said, oh, so that's what you do. And I said, yes. And I used to volunteer at a place and they used to do the same thing as well. So if you walk into a place, your interview starts right there, not when you go in to sit with the panel. So just remember that. So that first impression should be created when you walk into that through that door, if it's an in-person. And if it's over the virtual, if it's virtual, try and also create that first impression. You go in, you greet them, hello. You don't have to introduce yourself, because they have your name already. If they have scheduled you, it means they have a slot for you. So they will have your name against the time that you have to that you join. Greet them. Yeah, we talked about the receptionist. Smile. I always tell people, when you smile, it just boosts your morale. I know it's very difficult to smile when you go into an interview because you're getting nervous, but I always tell people, just remember somebody who makes you smile, and then just smile. And then if it's virtual or in person, you go in and there are 2 or 3 people, there will be one that will have a kind of a face that looks welcoming. Now look at that person and then always do your talk, because that person is going to be your comforter. And I do that, where when I go in 2, 3 people, I look at the person that smiles a lot, and then I just picture that person, or when I talk, I run my eyes around that person very much, because I know that person is smiling at me, so at least it's giving me some comfort. And when you smile yourself, it eases the pressure on you as well. And it demonstrates confidence, because you're very nervous throughout the interview process. You can't tell an employer that you're nervous throughout a process. You can tell them, you know what, I'm very nervous. Maybe if it's your first time of interviewing, you tell them, this is my first time of going into an interview or a virtual interview, so just bear with me, but I'm sure I'm going to be fine. You just break the ice with something like that and laugh and talk, and they'll tell you, oh, take it easy, you'll be okay. But you're telling them that you are aware of yourself. The self-awareness is also something that is important. And then also take notes. Take notes. You remember that is why you have to have a pen and paper on you to take notes. Maybe they are telling you something, you ask them, oh, what's the long-term goal of your organization? Or, oh, I looked at your this and this from my research on your website. I realized you do this, that. I was just wondering if you can elaborate more on that. Then you are writing. You're showing them that you are paying attention, or you are what? Responding to what they are telling you. Some places you'll be what? You should be ready to shake hands, which is fine, but don't offer the handshake. Wait till the person offers you a handshake and then you take the handshake back. Now we do virtually, so we don't do handshakes, but if it's in person, yes. I have seen in situations where I know with us Muslims, you don't shake hands with males. Here I see that where certain people from different Muslim backgrounds, men don't shake hands with women. Women don't shake hands with men. So it happens where they will go into an interview and they won't want to their hands to be shaked. But I know back home we do the handshakes where it's not common, but it happens. Sometimes some places you go, that is where how the person comes to greet you and then walk you into the room for the interview. But we always tell people you don't offer the handshake because you don't want to offer the person a handshake and then the person says no to you. So wait till the person offers you a handshake and yes, you then take it back. But if they don't, then you don't initiate that. So we've talked about appearance, which for men, dressing up, we've talked about how important that is. So starting, you have to also think about your personal appearance well ahead of the game. If I have an interview next week, I should start thinking about what I need to wear so that at least I rule that out of my list because that is part of the preparation. Yes, because if you wait till today, tomorrow, and then maybe tomorrow is your interview and today is when you are wondering what should I wear, then that becomes an issue. So never wear jeans. We talked about it, or tennis shoes. That is sneakers to a job interview. Dress in clothing and shoes that are clean, neat, and then hygiene is also another thing that you have to be mindful of. I always tell people, you have a job interview, take shower, and it refreshes you very well. And be careful not to put too much of perfume on just because you don't know the reaction of the individuals that are going to be interviewing you. This part of the world that I am, people are allergic to perfume. So most workplaces will tell you they are scent free just because people are allergic to that and it can kill somebody. But I would say, yeah, try and then not put too much perfume because you don't want to create that attention. You walk into the reception and everywhere is smelling perfume. You don't want that to dominate what you want to show to the employer, which is your skill set. And then pay attention to the hygiene, which I talked about. You don't want to get into a place where you sit and then the whole room, there's a different odor altogether. You don't want that. And I tell people when you shower like that, it refreshes you for an interview. It clears your brain for an interview. Here we were raised, we take shower every morning before we go to school. But this part of the world that I am, some parents don't give their children baths in the morning. But because of where I'm coming from, and I believe that it refreshes your mind to go to school. My son still takes shower every morning, even if it's winter, he still has to because that's how I was raised, and then I'm used to that, and I want him to grow up to also be used to that. And it also refreshes his mind to be active. That's what I believe. So pay attention to your personal hygiene, and the personal hygiene also includes all the wearing perfume and what have you, and then also not going in and then having a smell that you think they might not be comfortable with, and they might not tell you. And places like that, when you go and that issue is there, they won't tell you, but what they will do is to shorten the interview. Maybe they told you the interview will be 30 minutes and then you go and then it's 10 minutes, then you know something is not right there. So we've talked about how to dress up for interview, your appearance. We've talked about the different types of interviews. We've talked about how to prepare for virtual interview and an in-person interview. Now let's look at, in terms of the preparation, what we need to also think about, which in interviews we call it the 5 R's. And then one is what? You research the company. If you research the company, it makes it easy for you to answer the question about what do you know about us? It helps you also answer the question about why should we hire you? Or why did you apply for this position? Because you applied for a position because this is what the company is doing. This is what skills the company needs for somebody in that position that they are interviewing for to come and perform. And you have those skills, and that is why you are applying. What do you know about us? I know you are a nonprofit organization, and your main focus is providing career counseling and job search support to youth, new graduates, and the all areas of what? Uh, Specialization is into apprenticeship, career counseling, job development, and then what? Employer outreach. So then you're telling them that you know about what they do. You've done your research. So they ask you, tell us something. What do you know about us? This is what you are saying. And usually you can just go to their website and read about us. The about us gives you, and then you go to the programs and services or our services, and it gives you the information on how to answer the what do you know about us. And then also you have to rehearse, which is why rehearsing your questions. And remember, I said practice or do mock interview practice or mock interview. And the practicing also involves writing your responses. So, for example, why should we hire you? Or what do you know about us? So, if I'm going to practice this, I'm going to write that question down. I go to ACESD website, look at what they do, and about us, what are some of their programs, and then I use it to do maybe write a 1 paragraph sentence that I'm going to use to answer that what do you know about us. And then whilst I'm writing, I'm reading it. So when I finish my questions and answers, then I sit down to practice how I'm answering that. I say to myself, oh, so Anda, what do you know about us? And then I start to read what I've written down. And then I could even get a friend that I give it to the friend. I give the questions to the friend to ask me, and then what? I'll respond back to the friend and see how it flows in my conversation with my friend. And then also, it's always important to relax yourself, because if you go in and you are too tense, you are too stressed out and very nervous, you forget everything. And that is when you come out and you're like, oh man, oh, I could have answered this question. And you look at your practice list and you had that a very good response, but just because you were very nervous, you forgot to even answer. So I always say, just feel relaxed, do breathe in and out. If you go in, and even if it's online, do breathe in and out. I do that myself. And then I picture somebody that makes me smile. And like I said, I watch if there are two people, I look at who is smiling at me, and then I just use that person to kind of calm myself down, because I see that smile on that person's face that calms me down. And in an interview, you walk in, you start and you are nervous, you can tell the panel, you know what, I'm very nervous, but I'm sure I'm going to be fine. So just bear with me. You telling them you are self-aware of yourself, and you telling them that doesn't mean that you are weak. You are just letting them know you are aware of that, so that when you start to talk, they won't just conclude that, oh, you don't have confidence, but it's just that is how you are. I prep people for interviews and everything. When I go into a job interview, the first few minutes I go through that, and I always say it. I'm like, bear with me. I'm just nervous, but I'm going to be fine. But I say that whilst laughing. And then they say, oh, don't worry, you'll be fine. Okay, thank you for letting us know. And then I continue. But it's when you continue, and you're still not answering the questions well, and you are not relaxed, then it means you don't know what you are doing. To say that you are nervous at the beginning is not a taboo, and that won't go against you if you know what you are saying. If you have the right answers to give, that statement is not going to go against you. I have used it several times. I have used it. I cannot testify. I told a group a few days ago that I got choked when I was in an interview, and I just told the panel I needed to drink water, and I did. And everybody was laughing. And then we came back to business again. Yeah, so it's normal. And review before and after your interview, because when you review the first one, it helps you prepare for the next one that will come. And I'm sure they review, some of you do it because you just gave me some questions that you were asking in an interview, and I'm sure you did that. You became aware of that as a result of what doing your review after the interview. So the review is very important. You do it. If you know you didn't answer, tell me about yourself very well. Next time you go in for an interview, you're going to be preparing yourself very well for the what? Tell me about yourself, because you felt it yourself that you didn't answer that question very well. And then you can then what? Also seek for guidance or support in what? Getting that question right next time. And then just compensate yourself, reward yourself, give yourself thumbs up. Sometimes in interview, you might go in and it's not that you didn't say what you were supposed to say. It's just that maybe the employer had another candidate better than you and decided to take that person. Or it could be that you appear to be overqualified based on what you said in the interview, and that's why you're not getting the job. So that is why I always tell people, you go into a job interview, you apply for a job, you have a master's, and the job you applied for is a first degree position. It requires first degree, and you have a master's, and maybe you took out your master's from the CV and they called you for an interview. If you go in, be careful not to bring the master's in. If you bring the master's aspect in and talk, that might cost you. You might appear to be overqualified, or you didn't give them accurate information. So just be careful about that. So try and also uh, always follow up. In the structure of the interview, we always tell people that following up is also very important. And the follow-up comes afterward. You finish the interview. And then the conclusion in an interview is when you always ask the questions. When they ask you, when they finish with the discussion, they sell, which is what you do mostly. And in interviews, we always say that you, the job seeker, you, the person being interviewed, you do 75% of the talking. And the people interviewing you just do 25. And they do 25 because they just ask you questions. Some places they will introduce themselves. They will introduce what the position is about. They will introduce what the organization is about. But most of the time, you don't find them introducing much information, giving you much information. They'll just introduce, oh, my name is so and so, I'm this, my name is that. And then they will then tell you that, oh, we are going to be asking you questions, which is in the introduction. We are going to be asking you questions. I will ask you some questions, and I will also ask you some questions. And then at the end, if you have questions, we will give you the chance to what? Ask and ask. So if Anda is going to answer 2-3 questions, Anda will be giving you 2-3 questions, and then you answer. And then Richard will give 2-3, and then you answer. And then most of the talking are usually done by you. And also remember, in an interview, if they ask you a question and you don't understand the question, you have the right to ask for elaboration. Don't feel bad about that. Don't feel bad asking somebody in an interview, oh, Anda, can you please repeat your question again? Oh, Anda, can you please elaborate on this question? It is better to ask for them to elaborate for you to get it right and answer than you beating about the bush. Then it means you just messing up, and they can easily tell if you are not, if what you are answering has nothing to do with the question. I have asked for clarification. I had the mock interviews I set up for my clients. A few of them came out and they told me they had to ask the employer to elaborate on questions, which I like that, because they elaborate and then you are able to answer it right, and that won't go against you, and it doesn't mean you don't have good listening skills, but it means you have critical thinking skills and you want them to elaborate on something so that you will see what information to provide to them. And then the conclusion is when you will what? They will ask you, oh, do you have any questions for us? And then you say yes. And then sometimes they will tell you in the interview, oh, how the process is going to go. They'll tell you, oh, maybe this is the first group round. And then if you make it, then we'll call you for the second interview or things like that. Sometimes they won't tell you. So in the conclusion is when you would have to ask questions. You ask, oh, thank you so much for your time, but just have a few questions to ask, and then you ask them those 2 or 3 questions that you want to ask, which is, can you describe a typical day for somebody in this position? Oh, hearing about the position, I was just wondering, is there anything that you would want to share with me in regards to the challenges that somebody in this position faces? Or what would you say is the long-term goal for your organization? Reading on your website, I see this and that. So I was just wondering, what is the long-term goal of the organization? These are questions that you can ask. And then also the question that you want to ask, the final question is, how soon would you hear back from them? You ask how soon do you want to hear, would you hear back from them? Would then let you know. If there's going to be a second interview, you will know. If this is just a screening interview, you would know. And then if they tell you, oh, we will get back to you in 2 or 3 days, or this is a screening interview, so we will have the next stage. If you make it for the next stage, then we will call you for a second interview. Then at least that way you know. And then that is when you even ask them for what? A business card, just so that it gives you the opportunity to be able to follow up. Because if they told you that in 2 3 days you will hear from them, and 2 3 days you don't hear from them, and you know Anda was part of the panel, Anda gave you her card, and then she was introduced as the manager, you would want to reach out to Anda. Or if Anda was the HR, you would want to reach out to Anda. And sometimes we do that also so that if we were not able to express ourselves in certain questions, then at least going into getting the follow-up helps you be able to elaborate more on some of that, where you will write in a few things to justify why you think you are a fit for that position after even the interview. And when they give you a business card, if it's in person and they give you a business card, make sure you check the card. I'll give you an example where I had a new graduate. He was an engineering student in a construction building construction. So his role was going to be supervising workers, going on work sites to look at what they do, construction sites to see what contractors are doing and making sure that they are going by the specifications and what have you. So he went for this interview, everything went well according to him. He finished and then he asked follow up and then asked for business card. And unfortunately, the manager gave him a different person's business card. And when he took the card, he didn't look at it. So he came out and then looked at the card and it was that. He said, what? And then he called me Anda. I just messed up. And I asked him why. He said, the manager that interviewed me was a female. And then I asked for a card just so that I could send a thank you note. And guess what? She gave me a card that I came out and read, and the name on it is not the name she gave me. She introduced herself to me in that interview. So I asked him, what skill did you demonstrate you don't have? He said, attention to details. I'm like, why? He said, but at least I should have watched. So now I'm telling and indirectly telling them that if I go to the construction site and they just tell me, oh, they give me a paper and say this is what they did, or this is what they bought, this is the materials they used, I won't even go to verify myself, just to be sure that what they have given me on the paper is the same as what is on the ground. So I told him, I'm like, okay, we learn every day. So at least it's a learning experience for you. And it also shows some courtesy there, because if I give you a card and you look at it in front of me, at least it shows the appreciation of the card that I have given you. So if it's virtual interview, you might not have the opportunity to get a business card, but whoever interviewed you or invited you for the interview should be the person that you can reach out to and then send a thank you note. And on Google, you can always find samples of thank you notes. And then I think in our handout, we have some samples, I believe. Yeah, I think we have samples of that you can use. Yeah, there's a sample of a thank you note that you can make it your own and then use it. And you do that to what? Stay out of the what? Stand out of the other candidates. Other candidates might not do that, but you want to stand out and show the employer. And the thank you note, you can always even write. Maybe they ask a question and you didn't answer it very well. In the thank you note, you can bring it and say, "Oh, I know in I just thought I will also share some more information just to add to what I did explain about question on this and that." And they still read it. They will read it. And that way you do that, it even helps you to, if it happens that you don't get the job, you have a contact that you can get feedback from that person as to what you can improve upon next time. Any questions before we continue? So now let's look at handling interview questions. It is important to always listen and then ask yourself, what is the interviewer trying to get from me? And remember, when you go for an interview, it's all about what you can offer them, which is what you said on your what CV and then your resume, your CV and then a cover letter. So it's always about not what you want to get from them, is what they will get from you. What problem are you coming to solve for them? And the problem you're coming to solve is your areas of expertise. Oh, thank you for giving me the opportunity for this interview. I can't wait to learn from your organization. No, I'm not bringing you to learn from me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I can't wait to be part of such a wonderful team where I will be able to use my this, that to contribute to the good work that you are doing. Then, yeah, you're telling them you're bringing them something. And also remember not to criticize your past employer. You might have issues with your past employer, but try not to criticize them in an interview, because the person interviewing you, you don't know who he or she knows, and you don't know how that person might be. So I might sit and say, oh, my supervisor was a worst supervisor, and then I narrate the story, what happened, how bad this person was, how this manager was micromanaging people and all those things. But you don't know if the person interviewing is worse than that person. So if that person hears those things, will not give you the job. They won't give you the job. And I've had a few clients go into job interviews, and that happened. That happened. The person had all the skills, but didn't get the job because the person was criticizing their supervisor. And you know, with Adam's question about why did you leave your last job, sometimes some employers would throw that question to you to see if you are going to criticize your employer, your past employer or supervisor. So in a question like that, if they ask you, why did you leave your last job? Oh, I left my last job because if you are trying to make a career switch, then you talk about it. If you you applied for this job because it fits perfectly into what you want to do and your experience fits into that, then talk about it. I remember when I was leaving my job for a new job, I asked that question, and employers will always ask you that question, especially if you are still working and going applying for new jobs, and you call for an interview, they ask you why. So in my case, I did mention that I wanted, this is what I was doing, but I wanted more to do in terms of, because I'm a believer of learning, and then I want to challenge myself. So I wanted to broaden my what knowledge or experience in the career development area. So that is why I was going into this, because I was working with youth, and the new one that I was being interviewed for was both youth and what experienced workers. So I wanted a combination of that. But always remember not to say anything but, oh, no, it's a bad company. You know what? I didn't get along with my supervisor. I didn't get along with my manager. That is why I want to leave. No, Even if you left on a bad note, don't bring that aspect up. Just talk about how you worked there. I am leaving because, as you can see on my CV, I have a degree in this and that, which falls within the position, this position that I applied for. And in my last job, I didn't see myself using my credentials very well, and that is why I applied for this position, which perfectly fits into what I studied, and I believe I can utilize my skills and knowledge to perform these duties as expected. So you are not condemning anybody. You are saying you are broadening your scope in terms of work. And then if you do it that way, it's going to be helpful. The question was from Abdul Momin, right? Fusaini, was it Abdul Momin or Fusaini Adam? So let me know if you want us to explore more. Yeah, and also prepare brief complete responses to your questions. We will look at scenario questions, how to answer scenario questions using the STAR method, and hopefully we can play a video that talks about the STAR method. So now let's look at handling interview questions, more interview questions. So think about questions before you answer. It is very important. And remember, I told you, you don't understand a question, ask for clarification. I have done that, and it didn't go against me. And support your skills and strengths with concrete examples. Oh, I have 2 years of experience in customer service. Or maybe in one of the answering of the questions, you can talk about a time where you had to handle an angry customer, or a time where you had to provide support to this number of people. So you giving examples, because in interviews, the examples we call, when you hear behavioral interview questions, they are those questions. They ask you to tell a story, give an example of a time, or they ask how would you do something. Because you can tell me that you have strong time management skills, you are great with people, you are a great team player, and then I ask you an example of give me an example of a time when you had to you got into a disagreement with a co-worker, and the way you explain it can easily tell me that you are not a team player. If you're talking and you bringing in the blame game, and you are not even telling me how you worked, how you collaborated to solve the problem, not showing me that you think outside the box, not showing me that you are a team player, and for that matter, you always want to resolve things in a professional way, eliminating the blame game, then I'm going to be scratching my head. And try and be clear and concise, and use good grammar. Don't use "you know what I mean," "yeah." Maybe I'm talking to you now, I might have some words that in an interview, I'll be very mindful of that, where I won't use "you know what I mean," or "yeah," "oh yeah," "yeah." I won't use that in an interview because it's a professional setting. But it takes effort to do that, just because we're now used to certain way of talking. So sometimes we go into an interview and we forget to separate the informal from the formal conversation. And be positive about yourself. Go in, do your best what you can. If it happens, it happens. It doesn't, you did your best. And I do the breathing and out, and I told you about the smiling. I do that. I still use that, and I still coach my clients on just smiling and go and do their best and leave the rest. If it was meant to be, they will get the job. You don't get it, you learn from that, and it helps you in subsequent interviews. Talk about what is relevant to that position that you are being interviewed for. So for example, I go into a job interview and they ask me, "Oh, tell me about yourself." I'm going to start. You don't have to mention your name because the person has your CV already. So what I'll be saying is, I have over 10 years of experience working in a nonprofit organization, where my duties included, or positions that I held include working as a one-on-one counselor, doing job development, and also organizing employer engagement activities for or different organizations. I am somebody who is I have very extensive experience in career counseling, employment counseling, uh, job development, and also I am somebody who knows how to develop workshops, job search related workshops. I have conducted prepared job seekers in areas such as self-marketing, which involves cold calling, resume writing, cover letter writing, interview preparation, and then job search strategies. I'm also knowledgeable in using PowerPoint or creating PowerPoint presentations. I am very proficient with all Microsoft applications. And I'm an individual who also works well in a team. I am very friendly. I easily build rapport with individuals wherever I find myself. And I also respect policies and procedures within an organization, as well as I'm culturally sensitive to embracing diversity wherever I find myself working or offering services to individuals. How about that? So you see how I went around? It's whatever I said is a combination of what? If you look on my highlights of qualifications on my CV, what I just said all reflects on my highlights of qualification. So I always advise my clients that if you're going into a job interview, what you use to describe, to answer the question about, tell me about yourself, is that highlights of qualification that you have. Because when you look at the highlights of qualification, it talks about both the soft skills, the hard skills, and then your educational qualification, and then the number of years of experience you have, and then a gist of some of the key positions that you've held. So you use that to explain. And remember, I brought in my computer skills. And if you look at what I said, if you go to look at a job posting for a career practitioner or employment counselor, a job developer, or employer engagement or employment specialist, is going to have those key points. If I'm using as an accountant, I'm going to be talking about my number of years of experience working as an accountant. If I have worked as a bookkeeper, accountant, as a senior accountant or junior accountant, I am going to talk about it. What accounting softwares am I familiar with, or do I know? What degree do I have? Am I a chartered accountant? I will talk about it, and they tell me about yourself. What computer programs do I know? Am I good at Excel, which is very important as an accountant? What accounting distance experience do I have? Do I know how to do bank reconciliation? Do I know how to do balance sheets? All those things I have to bring in. Do I know how to write checks? And then I bring in my organizational skills, which is very, very important. My analytical skills, which is very important. My teamwork skills, which is very important. If I have those ones on my CV, then I need to talk about that. Nothing about, why you applied your personal life, whether you are married, you have children. You don't have to say that. Where you coming from, your ethnic background is not relevant unless in a position where they are asking the dialects you speak, then bring in that in the tell me about yourself and talk about the number of dialects that you speak. Because remember, they are also matching what you are saying with what you put on your resume, your CV, and then what they are looking for. So if I'm applying for a job as a community development worker to work with women groups, and then we're going to be community sensitization and what have you is included, I will be talking about my number of years of experience working as a field worker with ActionAid, where I performed duties such as this and that, and then also my my certification in that aspect, where I have a diploma in community development, I have a certificate in community animation, I have a certificate in report writing. I will bring in all those aspects, and then my computer skills, and then also my organizational skills, my planning skills, my monitoring and evaluation skills. Because if I put on my CV that I used to do monitor program activities, projects within the community, then my implementation skills that I mentioned comes to back that up. If I say I have planning skills, I say I did community consultation with community women groups, and they see that I held group meetings with women organization to eventually disburse loans to them, then I'm backing that up. So they tell me about yourself. In interviews, we call that the 5-second sale. So it's 5 seconds that you use. And in this video, he talks about it as 45 seconds. An employer can use that to get discouraged from interviewing you or not. And I always tell people, don't bring in your marital status, don't bring in your children. If you are a female and you talk about that, an employer could use that and not give you a job, thinking, oh, this job requires being available all the time, but she has children. Is she going to be able to show up? Is she going to be reliable? So you don't want to give an employer that opportunity. And we also always say that, remember I was talking to you about the behavioral interview questions. They use scenarios. Some employers will give you scenarios, but some employers will not give you, most employers will not give you scenarios, but they will ask you a question that will let you come out with what? Give them a scenario, which is an example. So maybe somebody tells me, describe a time when you had to work in a team, or describe a time when you had to lead a project. And then they want to see, how did you lead that project? And the way you explain how you were able to lead the project can let them conclude whether all the organizational skills, the decision-making skills, the strong leadership skills that you put on your CV is actually true. Because the way you explain it will give them, because you're going to tell them the task, what the situation was, the task you took, and then the action, and then the result of it. So if you are telling me you are a people person, I always tell my clients, if I ask you to give me an example of a time when you had to deal with an angry customer, and you start to tell me, oh yeah, this customer was rude, we were arguing, I was trying to make my point, and this person kept going on, and I also tried, then you're telling me that you are not professional. You're telling me you don't have patience. Because you're telling me that you don't understand what customer service is, because in customer service rule, the customer is always right. So even if the customer is wrong, you don't argue with the customer. So if you're telling me you were back and forth arguing with the customer, you've just blown everything. So if you tell me you have great 2 years of customer service experience, and you telling me how you dealt with a customer, then I'm going to be scratching my head as an employer. Or they ask you, oh, do you like dealing with rude customers? And you say, no, I can't stand people like that. Then you are eliminating yourself from the game, because in customer service, especially if the job you're going to work in has to do with you dealing with rude customers all the time, then it means no, it will be overwhelming for you, and maybe you might not give them a good name. And remember, when you are rude towards a customer in an organization, or you act unprofessionally in any job, it's not about you, it's about the employer that you represent. If I act inappropriate to any of you, it's not Anda's name will come, but it will be qualified with what? The organization that Anda works for. So that is how it is. So if you put up a bad behavior or act in an unprofessional way, then it comes back to the organization, because that is how it's going to go. Because Anda came to work for the organization. So if she tarnishes the image of the organization, if you're going to mention Anda, you eventually mention the organization's name, because that is where she was working, and you seeked that service, and then Anda was unprofessional to you or was rude to you. So always remember, when they say describe a time, give me an example of how you handled a situation, or you delegated your work to your co-workers as a leader, or give me an example where you had to lead a project, where you had to supervise a project, or where you had to deal with an issue. Then no, they want you to give an example. So always remember that, and then give your response. It shouldn't be about your skills again. It should be about what you did, because when you are describing what you did, the employer can easily pick the skill set from that. The employer can, if I ask you a question, give me an example, and you start to give me the example, I can write down the skill set, the soft skills, both the soft and the hard skills that you demonstrated in that explanation, and then I can tell you those, pick those points for you. Or they'll ask you, and if they ask you, tell me about a time you handle a situation, and it so happened that that situation they are asking you never handled that before, you would then tell them, I have never encountered this, but if it happens, if I find myself in a situation like this is how I will go about it. Instead of saying, oh, I've never done that, and you don't say anything again, bring in what you would do if you find yourself in that situation. And remember, I talked about using the STAR method, which is very, very good because it shortens your responses and it makes it also concise for an employer. Frank, for some reason, we are not able to play. I played the video, but people couldn't hear it. I think it's still the same. Is it the same thing? Same problem.
Still, yeah.
Can
sure.
you hear?
Yep.
Can you hear?
No,
No.
please.
Yeah.
No.
Frank. Yeah, Frank.
But if you have
I
the
don't know
file,
what
do you
happened.
have? Yeah, do you have? If you have the file, you can open it in the either any media
browser.
player and then share that screen. Yeah, share that one, right?
If we're going to do that, that might take us a distance
You don't
just
worry. I
because
think
it's just
don't worry.
few minutes.
We'll post it. We'll post
We'll
it
post
on the
that, yeah,
platform. Then
so
they
that
will
people
just.
can, yeah. But I always tell people to go to Google because Google, I'm saying Google, YouTube, and YouTube gives you so many information. Because this one that I'm using, I got a few from online. But somebody is going for an interview and let us know. We will send some samples for you to look at. But also remember, I said I will prepare you for the interview as well. And this was just going to talk about the STAR method that I earlier on talked about, because you use that to give examples. Because if they're asking you, oh, how would you handle this? What would you do if you find yourself in this? Using the STAR method helps you a lot. And in that one, you are describing what? The situation and the task, which is what you were supposed to be responsible for. Your responsibility in that, and then the action you took, and then what? The result of that action. Maybe I talk about there was a project that we were supposed to do in a community, and then it so happened that two groups were in a disagreement as to what we should, the area of intervention that we should provide to them. So as a field worker who was a representative of my organization, what I did was to bring the two groups together in a discussion, and then to see what we could prioritize in terms of what was very necessary for the community to have, since we couldn't do the two projects that both groups wanted. And then as a result of my mediation in the group, and then some of the leaders from both two groups, we were able to what? Decide on one, which the both parties were what? Happy about. And then we then decided what? To start the implementation of the program that we settled on, with the involvement of all two groups. So in this narrative that I gave, what skills can you tell me I demonstrated? Just listening to what I said, what skills can you tell me I demonstrated? Anybody wants to share what they've observed about the skills I demonstrated? Based on what I talked, I demonstrated what? Communication skills, listening skills, problem solving skills, mediation skills, planning skills, and then eventually what? Program what? Implementation. And then leadership skills too, because I brought the two together to facilitate whatever the problem was, and then finally using my problem solving skills to what? Eventually get both parties to come together, and then my sensitization, and then my community mobilization as well. So if you give an example, this is how an employer is able to extract the skill set that you have from that example. You could write all this on your CV, but if I ask you and if I ask you a question and you give me the example, you tell me the story, I can match the skill set that I extract from that information that you provided and match it with what you have on your highlights of qualification as to whether you really have it. So it is very important to always try to use examples. And I tell you with the examples, the STAR method, there are techniques here, there are example questions that we have with answers that you can use to kind of customize it to your own way of answering such questions. And I'll always be around to do mock interviews or practice with you as well if anybody has a job interview. So we did talk about the references, where I said at least have 3 to 4 people that know you work related and then skills related as well. And you could use your school professors that I said. So it's in this, your supervisors at work, and the people that you have worked with in the community. So if you belong to an organization, maybe a group in the community, an advocacy group in the community that is providing community sensitization or raising awareness of certain issues, you can use that community group where the leader can talk about. Because in interviews, when an employer calls you, the employer is not asking, oh, how good was Anda on the job. Your people skills are what they want to ask for. Your soft skills, your professionalism, which is, did you show up for work on time? How did you work with people? And then sometimes they will even ask the reference. So would you hire this person if the person decides to come back to you? And if the person says yes, then they ask why. Oh, because Anda was a good employee. Anda showed up on time. She got along with everybody. And Anda was always willing to challenge herself to take up new roles. You assign her new tasks, she would take it and then ask you to guide her as to what to do. When she was working here, I had no problems with having to be supervising her all the time because she knew what she was supposed to do. I didn't have to tell her. She would always take the initiative and even come to me with suggestions. So that is how good Anda was. But it so happened that she wanted to explore another new career, or new endeavor for herself, for that matter, had to go, and I will always be there to give Anda a reference because she was a good employee. And she comes back for an opportunity that she sees herself to fit into our organization, I'll be more than welcome to give Anda the opportunity because I know how she works. And I know she will always not disappoint me in terms of her performance. So you see, so you want teachers that will talk about, no, Richard was very active in class, very curious, always asking questions. And when it came to group work, he was always to do his work on time. He got along with his group members. He was a very good student. He was always on time, well prepared when he comes in for lectures. And whenever you assign him tasks here, and if he didn't understand something, he will find time and look for you to help him understand. So that is how he was, because he always wanted to do the right thing. So you see that they are asking about how you showed up your teacher. When I was talking about work, it was different from how I use the teacher reference to explain. But it's still your character that the person is talking about. So always remember those things. So like I said, you can have 3 to 4 just as backup. You have 3, it helps. And employers, they don't ask you how many references you send to them. I've been looking at all the Ghana job postings. They don't tell you the number of references, and some of them I don't even see them ask that you should attach your references, your referees to that. So if you don't attach your referee, it won't go against you. It's when they call you for the interview and you go in, you make sure you have your referees listed with on you, so that if they ask you, just give it to them. Or after the interview, if they want you to email it, then you can email it. But even if you want to also email it, you can email it with the 3 references, and that won't go against you. The more, the better. The 3, no, if they don't find 1, they can use 2. They can make a decision on 2. But most positions, if it's an entry level, managerial level, for sure, they will need more than 2 to make a decision. And always remember to ask permission from your references before you use them. If you don't ask references and you use them, they might call them and they won't even say anything. I've had experiences where people use other people for references and they are calling, the employers call and the people, it takes them by surprise. There was one that even just told the employer they didn't know that the individual was going to use them as a reference because they didn't tell them. And the tone of the voice of the individual it wasn't impressive to the employer. And so the employer didn't give the individual the job. And then as the employer, the individual then called the reference and the reference said, why didn't you tell me you were going to use me as a reference? Because I didn't know. So they took me by surprise. I didn't know. I was kind of stuck as to what to talk about, and I was not happy about it because you should have asked my permission before using me as a reference. And when your references, they are calling them and you don't get them, some places that might call you and tell you they can't get hold of your reference number one. Some places they won't call you. They will just leave it and move to the next candidate. So always ask permission from your referees. And what I do is when I go for a job interview, because it's maybe something different, what I do is I send a copy of my CV that I use for that job to my reference, just so that the person can also read. Or right after my interview, I call the person and say, this is how the interview went, just so that they know what to touch on. So I always tell people, now that we are job searching, if we have our referees list ready, let's speak to those referees and just let them know that we are currently looking for job. We are job searching. So just in case you might need them for the reference, you've put their names down. So if you go to a job interview and they tell you that they are going to reach out, you just let them know. And you don't have to call them. You can, if you have them on your WhatsApp, you can just do that, just so that you don't find yourself going through the experience that I shared with you. Yeah, from the individual. Yeah. And then what you should also do after your interview, ask yourself, what did you do well in? What can you change? What can you do differently next time? Which questions do you think you answered very well? And which questions do you think you can improve upon? That is all that we can do. So that if I know what I answered very well and I feel confident, then the ones that I'm not confident, next time I will work on those. I'll put more effort in those areas than the ones that I know I already know how to answer those ones very well. And did the job this an interview live to your expectations? Sometimes you might go to a job interview and then you finish and then you say, oh no, this is not what I was expecting, so I don't think I even want it. Yeah, I've had somebody who said went to a job interview and then after that the person decided they didn't want the job, so when they called them and gave them the job offer, they turned it down, just because based on the interview they realized that was not what they wanted, so they didn't want to get into that. And if you don't get a job, don't take it personal. No, you can always improve upon that and try and see if you can get what feedback from the employer as to what you did right and what you did wrong, areas that you need to improve. Sometimes some employers will tell you, some companies have rules where they don't share that with you. Some companies don't have the rules and then they will tell you. So if you take a business card from me after an interview and you reach out with a thank you note and what have you, and I think later you don't hear from us, or we call you and tell you that, oh, you know what, you didn't get the job, or we send you an email, you can reply back to me and say, okay, Anda, thank you so much for the feedback, but I was just wondering if you could share some insights on areas that I need to improve on, just so that it can help me with my subsequent interviews. You put it that way, an employer is going to give you an feedback, but oh, I didn't get this job. Oh no, I thought I did well. Then it means you are saying you did well, so you won't get that. And I have done that in interviews before where I ask for feedback. And I've done that with my clients too, where I get them to ask feedback, just so that it will help us to prepare for subsequent interviews. And it's been very helpful to most people that I have suggested that to. So I would say you should give that a try. If you try and they say they don't give feedback, that is fine. Some companies won't give you feedback. They will just write a note, or some will even call you and tell you that you didn't get the job. So when it happens, don't take it personal. It cuts across everywhere in this world. Most employers, where I am, employers do that, where they won't give feedback. except that it's employers that I built relationship with, where they will be able to tell me just because I referred people to them, so they would give me the feedback. If not, they don't give feedback. Some places will just write you a letter telling you, oh, unfortunately you didn't make it for the job, and then that ends it. So now we've talked about how to prepare ourselves, the referees we need, how to answer questions, how to use the STAR method in answering questions, how to answer behavioral interview questions. Now let's look at the reasons why people don't get job offers after the interview, because we said the resume gets you the interview and the interview gets you the job. And now you do the interview, and there are certain things that might also prevent you from getting the job during the interview, which is what people appearing wearing inappropriate what coming out looking inappropriate, which is in terms of appearance, so dressing inappropriately. And remember, I said sometimes you look at the workplace that you go in and see how you can fit in and dress accordingly. Being late is another thing. I've had somebody go to a job interview, was 15 minutes late. Although called to tell the employer they were late, they got there and the employer said, no, thank you. They didn't interview them. And when you are late for a job interview, it's a red flag. You're telling the employer you have time management problem. And at my job, there was an individual that the receptionist told me, said, Anda, I knew this guy was going to be late all the time. And I asked her why. And she said, the first day he came for the interview, he was late. And I thought, oh, maybe it's the bus. The day he was starting work, he was late. And hasn't him been late all the time? And that was what was the order of the day. So she observed that and she told me, and we all observed that he was always late. So being late, especially if the job you come in to do requires you to show up on time all the time, being late will be a no-no for an employer. It will be a red flag for the employer. And we had a co-worker who wanted a government job, which pays very good, but he had problems with punctuality. So when they called for references, our manager had to talk about that, because they asked about your your time management, your punctuality at work. And our manager said she couldn't lie about it, so she said it. And they didn't give him the job. And he himself came and told me, you know what, I need to work on this, because I know, because when he finished the interview, he told me, oh, the interview went very well. And the moment an employer asks for your referees, it means you are getting the job unless something else comes up. So he didn't get the job. And then he learned from that. You can always get to the place on time if you don't know the place, and then get a place to just hang around. And what some people do is they even go and find the place first before the interview date, just so that when they go, they know exactly where they are going. I've had clients tell me that's what they do. I've been running a program, I think 3 weeks ago. Next week is my 3rd week. And when we're doing interview skills and we're talking, one told us that he had to come, drive around to see the place, just so that he knows the place before the interview date and the start of the program, the training program. And I said, and she said, no, you do that. It helps you a lot. It calms you down because you know exactly where you are going. And then people have also appeared to be disorganized. You go to a job interview in person and your papers, they ask you for your referees, and now it's when you look in to find it, you don't even know. Let them ask you and then you pull it out. Where's your CV? You go, you arrange your CV and you sit in, you have the job posting in front of you and you sit in, you showing that you're organized. But some people appear and to be disorganized, which if the job that you're going to do requires strong organizational skills, then you just told them that you don't have that. And then poor communication skills. And I always tell people, communication skills is not just about speaking good English or this thing. It also requires listening, articulating what you are saying, and then also your choice of words. Because if you go and you're using certain inappropriate words, it's going to be perceived as poor communication. So it's not just poor meaning you were not using good English. It's also the choice of words and your understanding of what they were asking, your listening skills, and then also your grammar. And remember, I was talking about if I'm going to a formal interview, I won't be using yeah, or I won't be using you know what I mean. Yes, I won't use those words there because it is not an informal setting. It's not people that I know already or I'm used to. They are not my friends. They are not my everyday colleagues that I work with. And then lack of also insight into the organization or the job. Because if you go and they ask you a question about why do you want to work with us? Why do you think you are the best candidate for this position? If we offer you this job, what would you do? What skills or what makes you the best candidate for this position? And you are not able to answer this, then it means you don't even understand what the position is about, or you don't understand the organization to then answer these questions. Because you go to work for an organization, although we do for money, but we also do it because we match what they do with what skills we have and experience, and see us to be individuals that can use those skills or those expertise to contribute to that company. And that is what we should be talking about why should we hire you? What do you know about us? Or why do you think you for this candidate? Why do you think you are the best candidate? Or if I bring you in, what would you offer me as an employer? What skills do you have that makes you stand out from the other candidates that we are interviewing? So all these questions, it's all about what you can offer the employer, which is what your skills and your experience. And then also people show lack of enthusiasm. You go into the interview and it's like you want to sleep. I don't want to talk to you then. If you want to sleep, then I don't want to talk to you. So show that energy, show that enthusiasm. And as new graduates, the enthusiasm, the energy is what we use to encourage employers to want to give us the chance. Because if they see that energy, that enthusiasm is motivation, showing them, let me give this person a chance. This person is going to use that energy. This person is showing me means when I give them the chance, I tell you they are going to work hard. They are going to work hard to learn because they have that motivation in them. They have that zeal in them, and they are going to push themselves to what perform as expected. But if you come in and I'm interviewing and you're sitting as if you want to sleep, you don't want to be there, then I'm not going to, because you're not enticing me. And if you are going to work in a job where portraying energy, enthusiasm is very important, then you are indirectly ruling yourself out from the game. And then people also what? Don't have clear career aim. You go in and they ask you, oh, so 5 years from now, where do you want to see yourself? Oh, why did you apply for this position? Oh, yeah, apply because I like your company. That's not an answer. I like your company because my long-term goal is this and that, or I like your company because, as you can see on my resume, I have worked in areas and this and that. And reading about your company, reading the job posting, I see that I can transfer the experience and the skill set that I have, or the experience that I have in doing this, that in company A, B, C. I can transfer that to work in your company to contribute to what you are doing. Then you are showing your what? A career direction there. But if you say, oh, I just like your company, or I just want a job, then there's no distance there. Or they ask you, oh, what is your long-term goal? And then you say, oh, I don't know. And I don't know yet. Just one, my long-term goal is to have a good paying job. Then there's no clear career aim there, because money is not, although we work for money, but I would want to talk about how I want to grow, how I want to progress in my career. And when we progress in our career, what? It brings us money. So we have different ways of what? Giving the narrative. And then people tend to be defensive. So I always tell people to be very careful about being defensive. And to avoid being defensive, don't condemn, don't talk bad about your employer, your supervisor, because you don't know who is interviewing you. And that is when sometimes those things happen, because when you say it, I might end up also saying something. If I'm that type of supervisor, then I'll bring in a point and maybe we'll get back and forth. And then criticizing criticisms of their past employers. We did talk about this. And then a tendency of giving excuses and blaming others. We talked about that. I gave examples. So don't blame your colleagues. Don't blame your employer. Don't blame your supervisor about you not performing certain duties based on what you explain. and then don't appear to be aggressive or rude. And don't show the lack of confidence. Nervousness at the beginning is not showing lack of confidence. It's when it continues throughout, then yes. And the last point is what? Poor references. Remember, I said you should give references, get people to be your reference if you really know they are going to be good references for you. And if you don't tell them and you use them, this is what is going to happen to you. So take good notes during the interview. We've talked about that. And then the follow-up, just draft a follow-up thank you letter, and we have samples in that also. And email the employer to say thank you. Send the thank you note not later than 2 days. We always say within 24 hours, but you can do it with not later than 2 days, and make a follow-up call. If you don't have the phone number of the person and you know the organization, you can just call. Hello, my name is Anda. I came in for an interview last week for a program officer position, and 2 managers that interviewed me were Mbrodiba and then Richard. So I was just wondering if I could talk to one of them. I was just following up. They might tell you, oh, Anda is not, Mbrodiba is not there, Richard is not there. Oh, do you mind giving me one of them's phone number if that's okay with you? You're building that relationship, that rapport with the receptionist to get that information. And they always have information. They are the gatekeepers. When we talk about cold calling, we call them the gatekeepers, and they always have this, and they are always very helpful. And when I'm cold calling, when I'm researching about employers, I try to build that relationship. And sometimes they are able to tell you the best time to call so that you can talk to Mburudiba or Richard. So you follow up with the phone call and then see. Sometimes they will tell you, oh, you'll hear from us in 2 days, and you don't hear anything. And you call, they will tell you. Then it shows the extra mile that you are going. It shows that you really want to work for them and you are making that effort to follow up. So I will end the workshop with this. I believe we've gone 18 minutes, and I always say, I know sometimes we go more than the time. When I'm doing a workshop like this and it's participatory, I will use at least 2.5 hours or 3, just because we're doing activities. But because it's virtual, I don't like to lecture. So, but today I think I found myself halfway through doing that, which I don't like that, because I always want people to also interact with me, and that is how we all learn. So thank you so much for your patience, and then